I was standing in my workshop, sanding down the fender of a 1967 Camaro I'd been restoring for the past 3 years, when I heard the front door slam. Not the gentle close you'd expect from family visiting on a Sunday afternoon, but that sharp bang that tells you somebody's got business they don't want to discuss. My name's Austin Pearson. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in this house for 42 years. Built my construction company from nothing, starting with just a pickup truck and a toolbox Michelle bought me for our first anniversary. We raised our boy Brandon here, watched him take his first steps on these hardwood floors I installed myself. I buried my wife Michelle in the backyard garden she loved so much, right next to the roses she planted when we first moved in. That workshop where I was standing? I built it with my own hands in 1987. Every beam, every shelf, every electrical outlet. It's where I taught Brandon how to use a hammer when he was 8, where I rebuilt the engine of Michelle's old Plymouth when money was tight, where I've spent countless hours over the years fixing things, building things, keeping my hands busy when my heart was too full of memories to do much else. The Camaro was my pride and joy now. Bought it as a rusted shell 3 years ago from a widow in Beaumont, whose husband had let it rot in his backyard for 30 years. Michelle would have called me crazy for taking on another project at my age, but she always understood my need to bring broken things back to life. The engine was a numbers-matching 327 small block that I'd completely rebuilt last winter. New pistons, rings, bearings, the works. The bodywork had taken 2 years of weekends, cutting out rust and welding in new metal, priming and sanding until my hands were raw. I set down my 220 grit sandpaper and walked toward the house, wiping my hands on the old rag I always keep in my back pocket. Same rag I've carried for 15 years, so worn and soft it feels like silk now. The voices, coming from inside, weren't happy voices. There was tension in them, the kind that makes your stomach knot up before you even know what's wrong. "Dad, we need to talk." Brandon's voice had that tone I remembered from when he was 12 and broke Mrs. Henderson's window with his baseball. Guilty, but trying to act tough. Scared, but trying to hide it behind false confidence. I walked into my kitchen, the same kitchen where Michelle used to make Sunday pancakes for 35 years, and found my son and his wife Stephanie standing there like they owned the place. Brandon was wearing one of those $2,000 suits he favors now, navy blue with a red tie that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a month. His hair was perfectly styled, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked like success, like everything Michelle and I had worked so hard to give him. Stephanie had on her real estate agent outfit, all sharp edges and fake smiles. A cream-colored dress that hugged her thin frame, pearls around her neck, and those designer heels that clicked on my hardwood floors like a countdown timer. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe style she wore when she was conducting business, and her blue eyes had that calculating look I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Well, come on in then," I said, even though they already were. "Y'all want some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." I gestured toward the counter where my old Mr. Coffee machine was still gurgling, the same one Michelle and I got as a wedding gift 45 years ago. "Dad, sit down." Brandon pointed to my own kitchen chair like I needed permission to use it in my own house. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. In 36 years of being his father, Brandon had never told me to sit down in my own kitchen. He'd asked me to sit, requested that I take a seat, but never ordered me around like I was some kind of employee. "I'll stand, thanks. What's going on?" The silence stretched out like a rubber band, about to snap. I could hear the grandfather clock in the living room ticking, the same clock Michelle's father had given us when we bought this house. Tick, 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 marking off the seconds while my son and his wife stood there avoiding my eyes. Stephanie stepped forward, holding some papers and wearing that expression she gets when she's about to sell somebody a house they can't afford. I'd seen that look before, at family gatherings when she was working the room, making connections, always thinking about the next deal. "Austin, We think it's time we had an honest conversation about your living situation. My living situation. I'd been living just fine for 68 years, thanks very much. Lived through Vietnam, lived through starting a business from scratch, lived through 6 years without the woman who made this house a home. My living situation was nobody's business but my own. This house is getting old, she continued, her voice taking on that fake sympathy tone. Real estate, agents use when they're about to deliver bad news. You're getting older. It's too much responsibility for someone your age. Someone my age, like 68, was ancient, like I was some doddering old fool who couldn't tell the difference between a screwdriver and a butter knife. I was 68, not 98. I still climbed on my roof to clean gutters twice a year, still rebuilt engines in my spare time, still did my own electrical work and plumbing. We found you a beautiful assisted living facility, Brandon said, not looking me in the eye. Instead, he stared at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework every night for 12 years. Great amenities, people your own age, meal plans. You'd love it, Dad. That's when he pulled out his phone and showed me pictures of some place that looked like a fancy hotel lobby. All marble and fake plants and smiling old people sitting around playing cards. It looked expensive and sterile and nothing like home. When? I asked quietly. When what? Stephanie frowned, like she didn't understand the question. When did you decide my life for me? Brandon flinched like I'd slapped him. Dad, it's not like that. Then what's it like, son? I kept my voice steady, the way I'd learned to do in Vietnam when everything was going to hell, but you needed to keep your men calm. Explain it to me. The silence stretched out like a bad poker hand. Brandon looked at his expensive shoes. Stephanie looked at her manicured nails. Neither one of them looked at me, the man who'd sacrificed everything so they could live the kind of life they took for granted now. Finally, Stephanie spoke up, her voice taking on that rehearsed quality like she'd practiced this speech in front of a mirror. We've already arranged for the movers. They're coming tomorrow at 10 a.m. I looked at the clock on my kitchen wall, the same clock Michelle bought at a garage sale in 1982. We'd hung it together that Sunday afternoon, her holding it steady while I found the stud in the wall. It was 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening. So I've got 13 hours to pack up 42 years of living. That about right? Brandon cleared his throat, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. We'll help you pack, Dad. We brought boxes and… Get out! The words came out quiet, but they heard them fine. The kitchen went dead silent except for that old clock ticking away the seconds. Dad, you're being unreasonable, Stephanie said, her fake sympathy sliding away to reveal the steel underneath. This house is falling apart. You can barely manage the stairs anymore. That stopped me cold. Who told you I can't manage my own stairs in my own house? Stephanie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She hadn't expected me to challenge that lie directly. That's what I thought. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The October air rushed in, carrying the smell of the oak trees I'd planted when Brandon was 10 years old. We'd made a day of it, father and son working together in the yard while Michelle made lemonade and took pictures with her old Polaroid camera. Now I said, get out. Brandon didn't move. His face had gone pale under that expensive haircut. Dad, please. We're just trying to help. Help yourselves to my house, you mean? The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I was past caring about hurt feelings. Help yourselves to everything I worked 40 years to build? Come on, Luke. Stephanie grabbed Brandon's arm, started pulling him toward the door. Let him cool down. We'll come back tomorrow with the movers. He'll be more reasonable by then. More reasonable. Like wanting to stay in my own house was somehow unreasonable. They left. The door slammed again, and I heard their car engine start up, those expensive German cylinders purring like a contented cat. Headlights swept across my kitchen wall as they backed out of my driveway, then disappeared down the street toward whatever fancy neighborhood they lived in now. I stood there in my kitchen for a long moment, listening to the silence. It felt different now. Not the comfortable quiet of a house settling in for the night, but the hollow quiet that comes after somebody drops a bomb in your living room. Then I did what any sensible man would do when he suspects he's being played. I started looking for evidence. See, something didn't add up, and 40 years in construction had taught me that when something doesn't fit right, you better figure out why before the whole structure comes crashing down. Brandon had a good job at some big law firm in Dallas. Made 6 figures last I heard from Michelle's sister, who kept track of such things. Stephanie had her real estate business, always talking about million-dollar listings and exclusive properties. Money shouldn't be a problem for them. So why were they so eager to get me out of my house? Why the rush? Why 13 hours instead of 13 weeks or 13 months? I went to my desk in the corner of the living room, the same roll-top desk my father had built back in 1965. Michelle had organized all my important papers there using a system that made sense to her, and, after 35 years of marriage, had finally started to make sense to me too. Everything had its place, everything was labeled, everything was current. I pulled out my property tax statement from last year, $4,200 for the year. Not chicken feed on a fixed income, but manageable with my Social Security and the pension from my construction company. The roof needed some work, sure. I'd gotten an estimate last spring from Tommy Rodriguez, whose father used to work for me back in the day. $12,000 to replace the shingles and fix some flashing around the chimney. A lot of money, but I had almost $9,000 saved up in my credit union account for exactly that kind of emergency. The plumbing was old but functional. The electrical was up to code. I'd rewired most of the house myself in the 90s when Brandon was in high school. The furnace was only 8 years old, a high-efficiency unit I'd installed right after Michelle's funeral when I needed something to keep my hands busy and my mind off missing her. This house wasn't falling apart. It was just old, like me. And there wasn't a damn thing wrong with old if you took care of it properly. So why were they lying about my ability to maintain it? Why were they lying about my mental state, my physical condition, my capacity to live independently? That's when I remembered the security cameras. I'd installed them last year after Gary Miller's garage got broken into across the street. Gary and I had served together at the local VFW post for 20 years, ever since we both got back from our respective wars. His Korea, mine Vietnam. When somebody stole his vintage Craftsman tool collection, tools that had belonged to his father and grandfather before him, I decided it was time to protect my own workshop. I'd put in a 4-camera system. Motion-activated, infrared, night vision. Everything uploaded automatically to the cloud. 1 camera covered the workshop, 1 watched the front porch, 1 monitored the living room, and 1 kept an eye on the kitchen. The installation guy said it was overkill for a residential setup, but I'd always believed in being prepared. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app, scrolling back through the past few weeks of footage. The system kept everything for 90 days, organized by date and timestamps. What I found made my blood pressure spike and my hands shake with a kind of anger I hadn't felt since the day they told me Michelle's cancer had come back. 3 weeks ago, while I was at my VFW meeting helping plan the annual barbecue fundraiser, Brandon and Stephanie had let themselves into my house. I watched them on my phone screen, Brandon and Stephanie moving through my house like they owned it, going through my papers, taking pictures of everything with Stephanie's phone. Bank statements, insurance, policies, the deed to my house. My private business laid out on my kitchen table while I was across town, eating potato salad and listening to war stories with my VFW brothers. "Can't believe he's still living in this dump," Stephanie was saying on the recording, her voice crystal clear through my phone's speaker. She was rifling through my bank statements like they were grocery store circulars. "The property's worth at least $450,000 now with all the development going up on Elm Street," she continued. "We could pay off everything and still have money left over." Pay off everything? What did they need to pay off? I kept watching. my anger growing with every violation of my privacy. They went through my bedroom, Michelle's jewelry box, even the workshop where they spent 10 minutes cataloging my tools and taking photos of the Camaro. But it was the footage from 2 weeks ago that really made my blood boil. Same routine, but this time I could hear their conversation more clearly. "We just need him to sign the papers," Brandon was saying, holding up what looked like a power of attorney form. "Once he's in assisted living, we can handle everything." "What if he won't sign?" Stephanie asked, sorting through my medical records from the VA. "Then we make him incompetent, get Dr. Martinez to write a letter saying he's got dementia or something, file for guardianship through the courts." Dr. Martinez. I hadn't seen that man in 2 years because I didn't need to see doctors every month like some hypochondriac. But apparently he was willing to lie about my mental state for the right price. The third video, from just last week, was the one that broke my heart completely. "How much do you owe them now?" Stephanie was asking, her voice tight with worry. $85,000, Brandon muttered, slumping into my kitchen chair like a defeated man. "The bookies aren't going to wait much longer. They're making threats, Steph. Real threats." $85,000. My son owed somebody $85,000 and he was planning to steal my house to pay gambling debts. I sat there in my kitchen at 3 a.m, watching my only child plan to destroy everything Michelle and I had worked 40 years to build. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework every night, walked down the aisle at his wedding. The son I'd mortgaged my future for, working double shifts and weekends so he could go to law school and have a better life than his old man. I thought about all the sacrifices Michelle and I had made for that boy. Not just money, but pieces of ourselves. I remembered working 16-hour days in the Texas heat, my hands so torn up from construction work that Michelle had to bandage them every night. I remembered the Christmas when we couldn't afford presents for each other because every spare dollar went toward Brandon's college tuition. I remembered selling Michelle's engagement ring, the one I'd saved 6 months to buy when we were 22 and stupid in love, to pay for his law school. Application fees. She never complained, never made me feel guilty about it, just slipped it off her finger and handed it over with a smile. "Our boy's going to be somebody," she'd said. "That's worth more than any ring." And now that boy was planning to steal my house and have me declared mentally incompetent so he could pay off gambling debts to people who made real threats. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the lies about my mental state, the willingness to destroy my reputation and independence just to solve his problems. Brandon knew me better than anyone, except Michelle. He knew I was sharp as a tack, knew I could still rebuild an engine from scratch and calculate construction estimates in my head faster than most people could do it with a calculator. But he was willing to have me locked away in some facility, labeled as incompetent, stripped of my dignity and freedom, all so he could get his hands on my house. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with my son anymore. This was a stranger who happened to share my DNA, a desperate man who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between him and a quick payday. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Taylor Chambers. We'd served in Vietnam together. She was a medic, I was combat engineers. We'd both come back in '71 and used the GI Bill to build new lives. She went to law school, I started my construction business. We'd stayed friends all these years, helped each other through divorces and deaths, and all the complicated mess of civilian life after you've seen what we'd seen. Taylor was the only person I knew who understood that sometimes you have to fight for what's yours, and sometimes the enemy comes from inside your own family. It was 3:47 a.m. when I called her. "Austin?" Her voice was groggy but alert. Old soldiers never really sleep deeply. "What's wrong?" "Taylor, I need help. Legal help. My son's trying to steal my house." I heard her moving around, getting dressed. "I'll be there in an hour. Put on some coffee." It's almost 4 a.m. "Austin, if you're calling me at 4 a.m. about family stealing from you, this can't wait until business hours. I'm coming." Taylor arrived at my door exactly 1 hour later with a briefcase, a legal pad, and the same grim expression I remembered from the field hospital tents in Ku Chai. When Taylor got that look, somebody was about to get their ass handed to them, legally speaking. She was 67 now, her black hair gone completely silver, but she still carried herself like the tough-as-nails combat medic who'd saved more lives than she could count. I poured her coffee in Michelle's favorite mug, the blue one with yellow flowers, and showed her everything. The security videos, the bank statements, the deed to my house, the recorded conversations about having me declared incompetent and stealing my property to pay gambling debts. "This is textbook elder financial abuse," she said, making notes on her legal pad with the same methodical precision she'd used to treat wounded soldiers. "Conspiracy, fraud, identity theft. We can file criminal charges." "He's my son, Taylor." She looked up from her notes with those sharp brown eyes that had seen too much. "I know, honey. I've got kids too. But some things are bigger than family. This is your home, your legacy, everything you and Michelle worked for." At 9:45 a.m., exactly 15 minutes before the movers were supposed to arrive, a big yellow moving truck pulled up outside my house. Taylor met them at the door with her business card and a smile that could cut steel. "Gentlemen, I'm Mr. Pearson's attorney. This is a legal dispute over property ownership. If you remove a single item from this house, you'll be accessories to theft." The head mover, a tired-looking man with calloused hands like mine used to be, looked at his paperwork, looked at Taylor's business card, and made a phone call. 5 minutes later, that truck was pulling away down my street. Brandon and Stephanie arrived 30 seconds after the movers left, their faces red with anger and confusion. "What the hell is going on?" Brandon pushed past me into my living room like he still had any right to be there. "Who are you?" "Taylor Chambers, attorney at law," she said calmly. "Your father has retained me to handle a rather serious matter." I watched the color drain from Stephanie's face. Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "Dad, what have you done?" His voice cracked like it had when he was 14 and got caught smoking behind the garage. "What have I done?" I looked at my son, this stranger wearing my boy's face. "I found the videos, Brandon. I know about the $85,000. I know about your plan to have me declared incompetent. I know everything." For the next hour, Taylor methodically destroyed their lies. She showed them the security footage of their illegal searches through my house. She played the recorded conversations about forging medical evaluations and filing fraudulent guardianship papers. She presented bank records showing where they'd already tried to access my accounts. "We were trying to help you," Stephanie said weakly, her real estate agent mask finally slipping completely. "Help yourselves to a $450,000 house, you mean?" I said. "Help yourselves to everything I bled for, everything your mother died protecting?" That's when the doorbell rang. Taylor went to answer it and came back with 2 police officers. "Mr. Austin Pearson?" the first officer asked. "That's me. We're here about the complaint you filed regarding elder financial abuse and attempted fraud." I watched as they read Brandon his rights, watched as they led my only child away in handcuffs while his wife screamed about lawyers and unfair treatment. The boy I'd taught to swing a hammer, helped with algebra homework, walked to his first day of school holding my hand. But he'd made his choice. He'd chosen gambling debts over family loyalty, chosen quick money over the man who'd sacrificed everything for his future. That was 8 months ago. Brandon took a plea deal, 18 months probation, 300 hours of community service, and full restitution. Stephanie divorced him before the paperwork was dry. The gambling debts? Those didn't disappear with the plea deal. Last I heard, Brandon had to sell his downtown condo and move back in with his in-laws. Taylor helped me set up a proper trust with ironclad protections. When my time comes, this house and workshop go directly to my grandchildren, not to Brandon. I still see Austin Jr. sometimes. My grandson, not Brandon Jr. like I used to call him. The court arranged supervised visits, and the boy's a good kid. None of this mess is his fault. He's 14 now and shows real interest in learning about tools and engines. Last Saturday, he helped me install new spark plugs in the Camaro. He's got steady hands like his grandfather's. I'm back, in my workshop most days, still working on that Camaro. The engine purrs like a contented cat now, and the bodywork's almost finished. Got the chrome bumpers installed last month. Michelle would have loved seeing it completed. She always said I had more patience with old cars than with people. Some folks ask me if I'm sad about what happened with Brandon. Truth is, I'm not sad. I'm disappointed, sure. But I'm also proud. Proud that I fought back when I needed to. Proud that I didn't let them take what wasn't theirs to take. This house, this workshop, this life, I built it all with my own hands. And nobody, not even my own son, was going to steal it away from me. Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who can hurt you deepest. But that doesn't mean you have to let them destroy everything you've worked for. I learned that lesson at 68 years old. Better late than never. You spend your whole life building something with your own hands. You've earned the right to decide who gets to tear it down. And when that person is family, standing up to them isn't betrayal, it's self-respect. The hardest lesson you learn in life is that love doesn't always go both ways, but dignity. That's something you can control, something you can keep, even when everything else falls apart.